Out on the track, no Porsche Carrera Cup on the schedule today. Instead, it's our occasional look at the Porsche Cayman Sprint Challenge. Now in its third year, and it's become an integral part of the Porsche Motorsport pyramid. This is round 5 of their competition. Tim Harvey and David Addison are watching.
Steve, thanks. Cars on track then for the second race of the weekend. They had a race yesterday, won by that man, Harry Foster, whose elder brother Louis is one of the stars these days of single-seater racing in America, whose father Nick used to be on the British Touring Car Championship grid. And with the result of yesterday's race determining the grid for today, he starts on pole position with Matthew Armstrong from company, and the driver that came here as the championship leader, double Silverstone winner Charles Clark, he had an off yesterday while in third, catching the leading two. It meant that he also had to make a pit stop to just check over any damage. He finished 9th a lap down, and he will start on the 5th row of the grid in the largely orange car you see in the background. And he's certainly a man to watch. He knows he's got to get through the traffic swiftly before the leaders get away up the road.
Yeah, Charles was winner at the first 2 races at Silverstone. Here's a look at today's grid.
Harry Foster starts on pole position with Matthew Armstrong second, ahead of Steve Roberts and guest driver Ben McLaughlin, who is one of the stars these days of the club-level Boxster Championship, ex-single-seater Formula Renault level driver. Toby Trice and Carl Cavers come next. Carl Cavers, the dominant man in the AM category, where he's had good battles with Rupert Laslett, next on the grid, and then Matt Greenwood. Charles Clark on the 5th row after yesterday's dramas, and Jason Pelosi missed yesterday's race. He was at a wedding, but he rounds out the grid.
A man after my own heart, Jason Pelosi, preferring cake at a wedding to racing here. I understand totally. But that man, just going back to Charles Clark, he set the fastest lap in the race yesterday, so he's not short of pace. So it'd be fascinating to see him come through the pack.
It was interesting at Silverstone because Matthew Armstrong won the first race from Charles Clark. Charles got the lead in the second, and it was the same pattern in both of those other 2 races, that for the first few laps it'd be a 10th gain. And then as the race wore on into the second half, suddenly those gains became bigger chunks, and he got away and built up quite a big margin.
It will also be interesting to see what they've done about tyres, because they have 6 new tyres to use for qualifying in the 2 races. So how you elect to keep tyres back for second race is a crucial part of this, and we'll see once the race gets underway who's got the tyre advantage.
So all of these are the Porsche 718 iteration of the Cayman, the GT4 Club Sport, 3.8 litre engines, 6 cylinders, 425 horsepower. They weigh in at 1,400 kilos with the driver, and up to the grid comes Harry Foster. So we've now had 3 different winners out of the first 4 races within the championship, the only double winner being Charles Clark. There he is, second generation racer. Dad Steve has been a British GT and Carrera Cup GB racer from seasons past, and the progress and the speed with which he can make that progress key to the outcome of this race.
Yeah, he'll need a good first lap to not lose too much track position to the front runners.
So to the grid they come, and into position slots. The last car, that of Jason Pelosi, and so our second race of the weekend, the 5th round of the Porsche Sprint Challenge Great Britain, about to get underway. Harry Foster then in the black and orange colours on pole position. Matthew Armstrong with him at the front of the grid as they go racing. Very good launch by Harry Foster, and a good one too by Ginetta graduate Steve Roberts, who gets second place. Look on the inside line. Rupert Laslett was way up on the curb on the inside, and Charles Clark actually not able there to make progress, but now he lines up for a full go on the inside, and then the outside, in fact, coming up to the complex, into which it is going to be Harry Foster leading Steve Roberts, and Ben McLaughlin up into 3rd place in the guest car.
Yeah, Matt Armstrong was the loser out of that as he fights back, and Ben McLaughlin has to ride up the curb on the exit of Seagrave. Is that going to lose him another place? But Harry Foster, great start.
And that's Toby Trice, another Ginetta graduate, coming up to have a go at Armstrong on the outside line at Noble, and he's done it. 2 wheels on the grass. That was brave stuff. Armstrong switches sides, comes back, and him on the inside, and they touch. Toby Trice somehow manages to hang on to that. That was the save of the day.
Yeah, I think Toby already thought he was through, didn't he? And didn't anticipate Matt coming back, but the gap was open there for Matt to go through, certainly. Leaders very close coming out of Church.
Steve Roberts having a real go in the red line racing entry here against the Team Parker car of Harry Foster. Steve Roberts then comes up towards the chicane. He's on the outside line and thinks better of it. Slots back in as they come then into the right, the left, the right again. Way up the curb, Foster. And then Ben McLaughlin 3rd in the guest car, taking the fight now to the leaders. And what progress of Charles Clark, 9th on the grid, I think 8th coming into the chicane.
Yeah, a little bit of a gap just at the front there. Fast opening lap. These cars, of course, have ABS. I say of course, but unlike their Carrera Cup compatriots, they have ABS and traction control.
So towards the complex for the second time they come. Charles Clark was indeed in 8th place. Now Steve Roberts having the best showing of the season. He's never been this high up the order, going really nicely as the cars come through Campbell, Cobb, Seagrave, and there, number 22 is Carl Cavers. Right up behind him is Rupert Laslett. Now these two battled all the way through the Silverstone weekend for AM honours. This is lap 1 of the race in replay. That was Toby Trice going through, and Matt Armstrong very definitely came back at him on the inside, and there was the contact.
Yeah, I mean, I think because as he'd run wide coming out of Noble, I think that it was inevitable there'd be a gap on the inside, and Matty Armstrong stuck his nose inside thinking Trice would run a little bit wider.
Nose to tail there. Look, you've got this fight between Matthew Armstrong then and Toby Trice as they run together up Woodham Hill. But Charles Clark's progress is not yet really bringing him through the field. Trice able to defend here. This is the 4th coming into the chicane. Up front, Harry Foster looking to do the double at Thruxton. New circuit to him. He only came into car racing at the back end of last season. So Harry Foster making a really good Thruxton debut. Home circuit goes through. A 1/5 of a second the margin. And Ben McLaughlin, 3rd, has done the fastest lap of the race. Now, Ben not eligible for points. He was, as I said earlier, a single-seater gun a good 2 decades or so ago. The bulk of his racing these days is done in the Porsche Club of Great Britain's series in the Boxster class, but he's an accomplished driver. He's been given this guest car and he's absolutely wringing its neck.
Well, good for him. I had a word with Ben in the assembly area and told him, look, he had to match what I did last year and get on the podium, and it's certainly lit a fire under him, hasn't he? He does do a lot of instructing here at the racing school here at Thruxton, so he knows this circuit really, really well, and he knows Porsches very well because he also works at the Porsche Experience Centre at Silverstone. In fact, their name emblazoned on the Zero car.
Seem to remember that your podium came with 2 people spinning ahead of you. Now, 2 people spin ahead of Ben. He's going to be on for a win here.
Well, no, it was a very high-class calibre of competition last year.
Of course, sorry, yes, that you forced the pressure on.
It was the pressure, yeah. But
Back
this is a great yeah, let's get back to the real racing.
And it is still Foster versus Roberts. But McLaughlin there, look, is getting closer and closer, and drama as Toby Trice with an assist arrives sideways at the chicane. Matthew Armstrong goes through, and Toby Trice takes his time to restart. They're all streaming past him. That is not going to go down well at all. Armstrong is 4th. Now Charles Clark is up to 5th. That's sort of the end of it, but the contact had already been made. Yeah,
well, we need to see it a little bit earlier than that, don't we? But the end result was that Toby Trice obviously lost out, and the car's not quick to restart either.
So there are the 3 race leaders going through. Toby Trice's car has just gone past our window with witness marks all up the side of it, proof of the contact. Now, up front, Harry Foster, fastest lap of the race now as he tries to stretch that margin over Steve Roberts. Ben McLaughlin in 3rd place, trying to close. 4th is Armstrong and 5th is Clark. And let's have another look at that drama at the chicane. Well, it does look as though Armstrong was trying to get into a gap that may not have been Cayman width. Yeah,
difficult to see from that angle. Contact was made in the braking zone, but whether one, you don't know if one was moving over on the other or what. It's unfair to call the blame, but certainly Armstrong was car doing the attacking from behind, so he will probably be the one that's being investigated afterwards.
But right now, Harry Foster doing a very good job, and Steve Roberts, new to these cars this season, also doing a very good job. Best we've seen out of him all season. It's Team Parker versus Redline up front. Now, this is the AM battle. Carl Cavers unbeaten within the AMs, but Rupert Laslett, who's another Ginetta graduate into these cars this year, has been a constant shadow all season. Carl Cavers has done the previous 2 years of this championship, so he's got much more Cayman experience.
Yeah, it is experience. I mean, this is the 3rd year of these cars, and there is a nuance to driving them, particularly for amateur drivers. There's a lot of weight transfer, although these are mid-engine cars, so they're extremely well balanced. They are derived from the Cayman GT4 Club Sport road car, so they are. There's a bit more movement in the chassis than say in a Carrera Cup car. But a great car for amateurs to drive, especially with that ABS and traction control.
Toby Trice into the pit lane, sadly. So after the contact at the chicane, he's done a lap to the pit lane, but that rather looks like it could be the end of the day for the SVG Motorsport entry. Now, McLaughlin, I would offer you, is dropping off the back of the leading two just a little.
Yeah, but look behind, because Charles Clark has now caught Matty Armstrong. That little kerfuffle that Armstrong had with Toby Trice actually slowed him down while Charles Clark was chasing up from the back, and he's now on the tail of him.
Charles Clark still leads the championship, but only just 2 points ahead of Matty Armstrong, so he could do with getting past if he can. Out of the chicane up towards the timing line once more. Through they go. Clark not quite close enough to strike. But he showed yesterday that he's got good pace, and he's showing it again. But then he gets a little bit stuck behind. So where does the move come as he heads once more towards the complex? Foster leading Roberts by 4 tenths up front, and very late on the brakes. Charles Clark tries to find a way not to fill the position at Campbell, but here at Cobb looks for the gap on the inside, but wasn't really close enough.
Matt Armstrong was very wary of turning in, wasn't he, to that apex? I think after he's had a couple of contacts already in this race, hasn't he? He's probably being a bit wary now.
Of course, with 2 bits of contact, it may be that car's not quite 100% anymore.
Yeah, the tracking at the front could be out. That left front was the one that the corner that took a knock on the back of Toby Trice. And Clark is catching, coming through Goodwood on the run down towards Church. Will he get a run at him here? There's just a little dab on the brakes to settle the car. Clark looks like he's carrying good speed through there. Will he get a little bit of a slipstream as well? He slingshots out the corner, moves to the right. Doesn't look like Armstrong's going to fight him. Is he going to? It's going to be a battle on the brakes. And Armstrong's still in front. Still holds that position.
Good defensive driving. Toby Trice, by the way, is rejoined after his pit stop, but out of the chicane comes Matt Armstrong, goes over the timing line with Charles Clark there behind him. The margin between those two is just 1/5 of a second. Harry Foster still leads as we work lap 7 out of 16 at Thruxton, but a really big battle going on then. This, remember, is for 4th and 5th between the top 2 in the championship.
Yeah.
Armstrong ahead, Clark behind him. So through Campbell, through Cobb. Now Seagrave, bit of a twitch from Armstrong's car, but not really enough to delay him much. Didn't give much opportunity, that, to Clark.
No, but he left a couple of big black lines on the track where he used up some of his tyre rubber. Clearly, he's got his traction control turned off. The pro drivers tend to run with the traction control off, and the ABS maybe just on 1 or 2, but he left a lot of his Michelin rubber on the tarmac there in the complex.
So Matty Armstrong heads towards Church, then through Goodwood Village, Church, that long right-hander that seems to go on forever, and then through Brooklands. Up Woodham Hill they come towards the chicane. These are the 2 leaders then. Harry Foster just ahead of Steve Roberts. Steve, who made a name for himself initially in Formula Ford 1600 racing, then had a few years off, raced BMWs, won championships, had a year or so off, came back into Ginettas and now Porsches, but Armstrong is under huge pressure now from Charles Clark. This is as close as they have been, up towards the line, through they go, and the margin this time just under 3/10 of a second as they go through. So, nose to tail towards the complex, but Charles Clark can't just afford to sit there, he's going to have a go.
It did look like the complex was the place he might attack. Not this lap on the way in. Through the middle. Now looking to get a really good exit out of Seagrave. And it actually looks that Armstrong does get a better exit, doesn't he, through that final part.
So Harry Foster, the race leader, still with that fastest lap of the race to his credit. Here is the fight for 4th place. Charles Clark, 5th, is the man that leads the championship. Man who's trying to pass on the road is his nearest rival thus far on points. But Harry Foster trying to build that gap then. So he came into this championship at the end of last season, just in the last 2 races at the end of the year at Donington Park. He comes down now towards the chicane with Steve Roberts still in that 2nd place, but now dropping off the back a little.
And Harry Foster, he just did those last races. Are we going to see Clark having a go here? Who's best on the... Yes, he launches up the inside. Armstrong gives him a lot of room. That was a terrific braking there by Clark. He really did commit to the manoeuvre, and he got the car stopped in time for the apex.
So place gained, and now he can push on to try to catch up to Ben McLaughlin, who is 3.3 seconds up the road. The other point about all of this, the championship runs in 2 classes, same car, but there's a pro class and an AM class. McLaughlin, although he's technically in the pro category, doesn't score points. That is the trouble Toby Trice being lapped by the race leaders. So in terms of points, anyway, Charles Clark's going to gain another place. But on the road, I suspect he will be able to catch McLaughlin before the end of the race.
Well, it's quite a long way to go, but as you say, there's several seconds to close up. There you see the gap. But back to Harry Foster, yeah, he just did that last meeting and got a podium, and that's what gave him the incentive, I think, to come into it this year. And he really does look like he's at home here in these cars, and will be a contender against Clark and Armstrong later in the year, championship points-wise.
Yes, at Silverstone, he got a third, and a third. But here, it's going to be win-win, seemingly, because he's looked absolutely mighty around this circuit at which he's not raced before. He comes then down to the chicane, into which also is coming Charles Clark in 4th place. Now, in the first sector, Charles Clark quicker than Ben McLaughlin. In the second, quicker than Ben McLaughlin. Remember, the margin between third and fourth was 3.4 seconds, and it's now down to 2.1. So Clark is on a mission.
Yeah, he... don't know about his tyre situation, but his pace certainly looks very strong, doesn't it? I know Ben McLaughlin had 2 brand new tyres on the left-hand side of the car and 2 used ones on the right.
There goes the race leader, Harry Foster, then up towards the left-hander of Noble, turns his way through onto the power again, brings the car towards Goodwood and Village and Church. Now, what are his lap times like relative to Steve Roberts? The gap is 1.2 seconds. He was fractionally the faster last time. You can see the way that McLaughlin is certainly being caught by Charles Clark, then third and fourth, that gap coming down and down after Charles Clark's very impressive move to get himself up into 3rd spot. And this is why Armstrong was delayed and Charles Clark was able to attack, because he'd run wide coming out of Church.
Yeah, he got a slow exit as a result of that, and he knew Clark was coming. You watch how much room he gives him on the inside, but nevertheless, that was a committed overtake. And I think Armstrong's sort of car may be a little bit the worse for wear, as you say, as a result of that 2 contacts early in the race.
It's been well used in this race, hasn't it? So the leaders go by, and the gap's down from 1.2 to 0.8 of a second. Steve Roberts then, much quicker that time around. So has he been looking after his tyres that little bit better? He pushed early, granted.
Yeah, and on that lap, Charles Clark set the fastest lap of the race to close up on Ben McLaughlin. The gap now 1.2 seconds. So that's quite an effort at this point in the race to set fastest lap.
Absolutely right, and he's taken nearly a full second, therefore, out of that gap to Ben McLaughlin. So is Harry Foster on borrowed time, or can he respond? In the first sector, he responds by going fractionally faster, but quicker than anybody through the first sector of this lap alone is Charles Clark again.
Yeah, he's really got his... Look, he's on the back of McLaughlin already. He's really caught him up fast.
So is he near enough to have a go coming up towards the chicane? He's a couple of lengths back, but equally they've got to get through Church yet, and that might be an opportunity for more time to be pulled back by the championship leader. Ben McLaughlin, who's not raced these cars up until this weekend, hardly any opportunity to test, has really risen to the occasion. It'd be really good to see him more in the championship for the remainder of the season. Here are the leaders into the chicane, and the gap to the eye is down fractionally again. 0.8 last time. There, the pit boards go out to the race leader for Harry Foster, Team Parker Racing, whose car, along with all the other from Team Parker Racing, is carrying a little sticker on the wing end plates for Jeff Parker, Stuart Parker's and Andy Parker's father, who very sadly died in the week. And Team Parker Racing running cars here in British GT today at Donington as well, but no matter which the venue, the team remembering Jeff Parker.
Yeah, and our thoughts with Stuart and Andy this week, but they're carrying on as Jeff would have wanted them to do, and that's racing and being at the front.
Change imminent for third, isn't it? Charles Clark lines up to have a go against Ben McLaughlin, thinks about the inside at Noble and thinks better of it, but now this is where you've got to be really brave. Into Goodwood, turn right, head to Village, keep turning right, then to Church, turn right again. This looping corner, and the gap you can see is about a car's length. That is all. Lead gap, by the way, down to 0.6 last time. So Steve Roberts certainly hasn't given up in his pursuit of the race leader, nor has Charles Clark in his pursuit of Ben McLaughlin. Out of Church they come. Again, just run it up onto the curb on the outside. The climb up Woodham Hill. Steeper than it looks. And then the chicane at the top. Heavy braking into the right, the left, the right. And there are the race leaders with a little bit more curb taken maybe by Foster that time.
Yeah, it did look like it. It just shows, doesn't it, that even if you're a fair bit quicker, catching up is one thing. As always in racing, passing is another. Because Charles Clark closed so fast on Ben McLaughlin, you thought that a pass was going to be happening straight away, but he hasn't found an easy way through yet.
Harry Foster bouncing his way over the curbs into Campbell. Now Cobb. There is Steve Roberts behind him. Steve, the more experienced racer, but of course slightly less experienced in Cayman terms, having not raced the cars up until this season. Now there is Rupert Laslett, who has taken over the lead of the AM class. He's got himself ahead of Carl Cavers. Now, at Silverstone, it was often the other way around. Rupert would lead early on and Carl would wriggle away past, but Rupert Laslett has gone after him and taken the class lead. And for third place, Charles Clark now on his toes to get past Ben McLaughlin.
Can he cut back on the exit of the corner, get the inside before they get to Church? He won't have quite as momentum, but he could force the issue. Ben, being the guest driver, will probably not fight him too hard because he doesn't want to interfere with a championship runner. But cleanly through goes Charles Clark.
And this is the lead battle, and you can see how the gap has come down again. It was 0.6 of a second last time. We'll have 3 laps to go at the end of this one, and there is Charles Clark having got past McLaughlin absolutely on the limit as he tries to hustle the car through the chicane. 0.4 of a second now between the race leaders. It's all tantalisingly close, isn't it, here for Steve Roberts? He's almost on the back of the leader. Very
close, and that poor exit, or the poor entry and exit for Charles Clark allowed Ben McLaughlin, and look, Matty Armstrong back onto the tail of them.
So this was the move.
Yeah, manages to have enough grip to turn inside Ben McLaughlin and keep momentum, and then be on the inside for Church.
So through he goes, Charles Clark up into third spot. He might be able to do something about the margin to Steve Roberts, but he'll run out of laps to do anything about overtaking unless a drama befalls either of the top two. But third from the back of the grid, no mean drive that by Charles Clark. Now, here are the leaders with Harry Foster fractionally quicker last time than Steve Roberts was within the first sector, but Roberts is the quicker of the two in the middle sector this time.
Yeah, ebbing and flowing, and always out of Church, Foster is pretty quick, so he gets a good run up the straight, and on the brakes he's also good. These are great cars to race, though. It's a shame there aren't a few more of them, because it is on the Porsche pyramid of motorsport. Last year's champion Theo Edgerton and Jack Bartholomew both graduated into Carrera Cup this year. And a lot of these cars racing in endurance racing as well. There's cars racing out the Nürburgring 24-hour this weekend because there's no price put on engine mileage or gearbox mileage. It's literally like a road car. You service it with oil changes. And Armstrong's through as well on Ben McLaughlin, look.
Yeah, Ben McLaughlin dropping
so it's surprising there aren't more cars out there. There really should be.
Because if you're an AM, it's a really good car to race, and it's an interesting mix of circuits because it does part of the total package, but also some British GT rounds. So there's a standalone race at a Porsche event at Alton Park, for example. And equally, if you're a career GT driver and you think about a GT4 Europe campaign or ultimately GT3, again, it's a good training ground.
Absolutely, it's perfect training ground. So I'm surprised there aren't more people taking up the championship. Hopefully they will. A bit more exposure this weekend on the Toka package, and we'll get hopefully a few more on.
Well, we've had 2 lively races, certainly, and this one ain't done yet, because as they come down to the chicane, there will be 1 more lap to run at the end of this. They are about to turn their way through the chicane onto that last lap, and you've got to say that Harry Foster is doing a really impressive job here of keeping everybody else at bay. He's withstood all the attention thrown at him by Steve Roberts. Over the timing line they go then. Now, onto the last lap. The margin has gone up again to 0.7 of a second. We'll get to see the cars in their next races as well, because they rejoin the British Touring Car Championship bill at Croft. Then it's that standalone race at Alton Park. British GT supports Brands and Donington to round out the season.
Yeah, well, certainly if Matt Armstrong and Charles Clark thought after the first event at Silverstone that the championship was going to be between them, yeah, they've got another thing coming, because Harry Foster's well and truly arrived with 2 wins, assuming he finishes this lap this weekend. And Steve Roberts has really announced himself as being a front runner as well. He's held Harry Foster literally in touch the whole way through this race. So great drives by both of them. And the rest of this series looks like it'll be a ding-dong between at least those 4.
Absolutely so. Both of them have taken big strides forward from Silverstone. In Steve Roberts' case, big strides forward over the course of the weekend, from the 1 qualifying into race 1 into this second race of the weekend. And he ain't given up yet because he's still shadowing Harry Foster's every move, trying to apply enough pressure at the last corner to trick a mistake out of him. But Harry Foster looks as though he has done enough as he comes into the chicane then in order to take a second win of the season, a second win of the weekend, and to dominate the Porsche Visit Cayman Islands Sprint Challenge Great Britain at Thruxton. It's 2 out of 2 for Harry Foster. Second goes to Steve Roberts. And then you wait for Charles Clark from 9th on the grid to take third. Fourth place will just go the way of Matty Armstrong ahead of Ben McLaughlin in the guest car, and then Matt Greenwood will be through 6th ahead of the provisional AM winner. There he is, Rupert Laslett, who in turn has managed to shake off the challenge of Carl Cavers, and then Jason Pelosi with Toby Trice down in 10th after the spin, the tangle, and then the pit stop, of course, that rather delayed him. But this will be a really, really good result in the Laslett household because he's worked so hard all season, and finally, 5th time lucky, the win is his.
Yeah, well done, because it's not Carl Cavers is a quick driver, and it's not easy to beat him, so that will give him a lot of satisfaction. But cool, calm and collected. I don't think I saw a single mistake from Harry Foster in that race. It was a really neat, accomplished drive. Well done.
So he has won both races over the weekend here, and Harry Foster didn't take fastest lap in either of them because that was where Charles Clark's pace came to the fore. In the end, Charles Clark ended up 3.6 seconds off second place and 4.3 off the win, but of course he did have to get through some of the traffic. But yes, a very impressive display by double race winner this weekend, Harry Foster. And Rupert Laslett taking his first victory within the AM contest. So good to have some different names as class winners or podium finishers here at Thruxton. Next stop is Croft at the end of June, where again they'll support the British Touring Car Championship. Very happy man indeed makes his way down the pit road. A winning margin 0.6 of a second, and a very happy team, no doubt. Very happy dad, I'm sure, keeping an eye on Harry here, and Louis Foster racing stateside. Charles Clark taking third place, and Steve Roberts, who comes home second, I think will be very pleased again that he has made yet another stride forward. Yeah, really good pace. Ex-single-seater man as well. With Redline, so the team's sharing the spoils. So out of the car gets Harry Foster, very happy man indeed, and to do 2 out of 2 anywhere, but especially at Thruxton and especially on your first visit, is quite something. As far as the championship is concerned, Charles Clark still leads it, but now Harry Foster and Matt Armstrong tied on second. Steve Roberts 4th in the pro class ahead of Matt Greenwood. Carl Cavers leads the AM 7 points ahead of Rupert Laslett, and then Jason Pelosi absent this weekend, but they were at Silverstone, Tim Cressick and John White.